By order of the traitor who seized power, all members of the royal family were brutally executed. It's scary to think about the fate that awaited people who did not want to obey the new rulers. Royal family of Grezikai. Golden hair, bright as the sun, was a symbol of their honorable family. All royals had beautiful golden locks, except for one person, Princess Clarissa. She inherited pink hair from her biological mother, who was a simple maid. The maid disappeared without a trace after the birth of her baby. Since then, Clarissa has been left completely alone. As the girl grew older, the royal family began to treat her with greater cruelty. Clarissa could not stop rejoicing at yet another pebble she had found. The little girl tried to use scrap materials as ordinary toys, which served as her only entertainment. Suddenly, the royal family passed by. Clarissa's half-brother was even present among them. The royal family did not usually walk along this road, which meant that the girl had to leave this place as quickly as possible. However, Clarissa accidentally dropped all the pebbles she found. Clarissa was afraid that the king would start scolding her again. The brother indifferently asked his sister what she was doing in such a place. The frightened little girl began to tearfully ask for forgiveness from her step-relative. However, the young man indifferently hit the young princess. He was outraged that such a pathetic half-breed dared to call him her brother. After all, he was the royal heir, and not some illegitimate offspring. The queen asked her son to stop immediately. It is true that Clarissa was rude. However, even in this case, it is not appropriate for royal family members to loosen their hands. The mother said that it would be very bad if her dear son caught some strange disease from this pathetic commoner. The servant, without any doubt, removed the head of the reigning queen from his shoulders. Clarissa couldn't believe that her half-brother managed to remain calm at such a moment. The baby experienced incredible fear because she did not want to die so easily. There were still a lot of things that she did not manage to do during her lifetime. The prince indifferently asked the duke to kill Clarissa first. The royal heir would have clearly felt better if the pitiful half-breed's head had fallen first. The young man was not going to beg for the preservation of his noble life. However, he wanted to be the last survivor of the Grezikai family. He would like to have this privilege even for the last few dying seconds. The little girl fearfully bowed her head in front of the sharp sword. However, the girl did not feel any pain at all. This time, the prince was the first to be executed. Despite slight remorse, the traitor decided to ignore the prince's last wish. The long-haired young man looked at the bloody picture with a smile on his face. The smell of spilled blood was so strong that the unfamiliar invader wanted to wash it off as quickly as possible. The young duke, who beheaded members of the royal family, expressed his desire not to kill the little princess. Clarissa couldn't believe her own ears. Perhaps the invaders will have mercy and give her life. The blonde guy indignantly asked the duke what had come over him. The traitor could not believe what he heard. It seemed as if his brother felt sorry for killing the little girl. The duke said that the reason for this is the National Safers Law, Article 12, Paragraph 17, which states that the execution of persons under the age of majority is prohibited. In other words, the princess was still too young for the usual execution. However, the blonde guy was outraged that they had to save the lives of the royal family of the defeated country just for the sake of one law. The duke strongly disagreed with his brother. No king in history dared to break this law. Therefore, they must act as wisely as possible in the current situation. The blonde youth had difficulty understanding his brother. Even if a girl is a half-breed, royal blood still flows in her veins. Besides, she is the last of this family. There remains a possibility that after growing up, this little thing may begin to talk about the legitimacy of power and its rights to the royal throne. The girl promised to remain silent. When it comes to death, a cornered person will begin to guarantee anything in order to save his life. Clarissa tearfully tried to explain that she was just an ordinary half-breed. Since the royal family treated her disgustingly, she didn't even have any thoughts of revenge. The little girl promised to pretend to be dead for the rest of her life. Therefore, no one will probably even guess about its existence. The blonde guy asked his brother why there were always some half-breeds hanging around. The captor told the girl that he would still spare her miserable life. The baby will be able to live until she comes of age. However, the older brother will have to take responsibility for her and take her to Sheridan. Clarissa could not believe that she had escaped death this time. However, the mercy of the new ruler was not so generous. The blonde guy told his brother that on the day the girl comes of age, he undertakes to bring her severed head. capital of the Kingdom of Saphers. The servants informed Georg that his assistant Quentin had come to see him. The guy bowed respectfully and congratulated the Duke on yet another victory. Georg Maximilian was a truly outstanding warrior. The Duke reported that, apparently, something had extremely disappointed His Majesty. Rumor has it that Quentin immediately returns to Sheridan without even taking part in the holiday banquet. Georg asked his humble servant for what reason he decided to please him with his visit. As it turned out, the assistant decided to inquire about the participation of Princess Krezekai, who was being taken to Sheridan. The servant wanted to directly express his opinion on this matter. Quentin was categorically against taking the princess to Sheridan. Georg sincerely did not understand his servant's dissatisfaction. However, Quentin continued to be indignant because it would be extremely difficult to raise this child in Sheridan. The Duke declared that he had enough money to raise one single child. There is absolutely no problem with this. However, Quentin was outraged by something else. Perhaps the cold-blooded person does not fully realize it, but children, without exaggeration, are extremely charming creatures. The problem was that if Georg Maximilian was burdened with raising a child for so many years, he would certainly become attached to him. Such an outcome is almost inevitable. Undoubtedly, you will have to spend a lot of your free time on this pretty child. It is necessary not only to feed her, but also to teach her and put her to bed. Georg will have to watch the little girl grow up. Surely, once he comes of age, he won't be able to cut off her head so easily. This is absolutely impossible. However, for Georg, the very idea that he could experience attachment to any living form of life seemed absurd. For him, the princess was just an ordinary prisoner of war, who, sooner or later, would have to be executed by order of the king. The servant said that her political position changed absolutely nothing. Sheridan's people will surely love this innocent child, but the young Duke continued to resist this idea. Clarissa was a dangerous child, whose mere presence could spark the uprising of the entire kingdom. The servant could not believe that the Duke would dare to kill the girl after she came of age.
According to Quentin, in this case it would be better to take the little princess's life.
Clarissa fearfully asked if she really would have to die much earlier than the appointed time. The Duke anxiously asked why the princess was here. The servant said that the girl wanted to meet the Duke once before she left. Clarissa fell to her knees and began promising to be as submissive as possible. The girl vowed to do everything possible so as not to disturb the Duke with her presence. The baby asked Quentin if they could reconsider keeping her alive. At this moment, the servant felt incredibly guilty. He shouldn't have talked about such cruel things in front of a small child. The assistant decided that in this situation, the best solution would be to leave the Duke's office. In the end, Georg Maximilian had the last word. The Duke began to actively reflect on the future fate of the little illegitimate princess. Looking at her behavior, it seems that her family treated her very differently from a member of the royal family. But even so, the blood of the late king continues to flow within her. The appearance of Krezekai, seen by Georg personally during the march, was truly terrifying. Countryside ravaged by weeds, children getting sick or dying right on the city streets, soldiers begging for food from the enemy. It seemed as if the problems of citizens did not bother the royal family at all. People in power indulged in luxury and debauchery. George had no intention of sympathizing with the princess of such a rotten and lost kingdom. The Duke stood up from the table and walked towards the little captive. He wanted to clarify the current situation. Georg promised the girl that he would certainly kill her. The execution will take place on the day she reaches adulthood. Judging by the expression on her face, the baby will again begin to beg to save her life. She could not afford any other actions. However, the baby was glad that she would have the opportunity to live until she came of age. The girl who was afraid of dying today began to bow to her savior with gratitude. Clarissa admitted that in fact she had always prepared for such an outcome. After all, such half-breeds will still not have the opportunity to live a long and happy life. The girl said that her brother promised to kill her before she turned 18. However, now she has the opportunity to live a few more years. Clarissa thanked the Duke for this wonderful chance. Moreover, she said that Georg is her benefactor. Quentin felt incredibly awkward in the presence of this little girl. Before leaving for Sheridan, the Duke tried to find someone who could take care of the princess. Of course, many servants were not happy with this idea. Submissive assistants wanted to be close to their master. Some even made excuses, saying that they had never ridden in a carriage before. This means there weren't many options left. The Duke ordered Quentin to take charge of the princess. Moreover, he openly declared his love for children, and now the Duke's assistant was obliged to fulfill the temporary role of educator. The servant felt as uncomfortable as possible in the presence of a child who was to be killed on the day of his majority. Quentin noticed that the baby was looking right at him. The servant tried to somehow justify his awkward silence in front of the little girl. Quentin even pretended that he could not open his mouth because of the dust that flew into the carriage during the ride. The servant grew increasingly desperate. The girl apologized, because now she was wearing very dirty clothes. However, as expected, Quentin could not accompany the princess. The servant begged the Duke to find him another, more durable replacement. The owner just continued to ignore his subordinate. The Duke was not going to take Quentin's problem as something serious. There is nothing difficult about taking a quiet ride with a little girl. The Duke invited his servant to talk to the child about something. For example, you could tell her about life in Sheridan. Quentin tried to do this, but for all the time it never worked out. All the time, Clarissa looked at him with incredible concern. In this case, it is difficult to explain to the child that he will be treated like a prisoner. Georg asked if he should worry about anything else. The servant said that as soon as the girl arrived in Sheridan, she would need to immediately get rid of her personal belongings and also forget about her carefree life. The Duke asked the girl if she understood everything. The baby stood quietly behind Quentin. The girl was repeated once again about all the nuances to make sure that she understood everything. Now no one among the servants will treat her like an ordinary princess anymore. The old life was left far behind. Clarissa admitted that she had never felt like a princess before, and moreover, she had never even had to celebrate a birthday. The girl once again repeated her intention to live an absolutely inconspicuous life. Even from her past life, when she was alive, she had learned to feel as if her heart had stopped long ago. Holding out the bag in her hands, the girl asked to be allowed to keep this child. Georg repeated his words indignantly. Prisoners of war do not have the right to dispose of property. Clarissa began to unravel the small bag in order to show those present its contents. The princess did not want to say goodbye to the last thing that had any meaning to her. These little stones were the girl's friend. Quentin began to make fun of the cold-blooded Duke, who had never had real friends before. The guy was alien to attachment to anyone. Before Georg Maximilian said too much, the servant intervened once again and told the girl that she could leave her little friend. In the end, their generous Duke gave his permission. The servant whispered to the owner that he should be more lenient. The little princess's friend was just an ordinary stone. There is no need to rip off the poor child even more. Those pure and innocent eyes couldn't be ignored so easily. The baby's radiance eclipsed everyone present. The guy sat down on his knee in front of the girl and asked her friend's name. The girl named the pebbles Malin. The Duke suggested that the baby had as many as 5 little friends. However, Clarissa protested, because her stones are collected in 6 and become one whole mullen. For some time, Georg carefully examined the pebbles. The guy then stood up and apologized to the girl for the misunderstood name. The Duke said that 100 mullen would officially be allowed to enter Sheridan as Clarissa's friend. However, the girl had to be more careful because loud noise, as well as celebrating birthdays, were strictly prohibited. The Duke said that in that case, they could begin to gather. The girl was ordered to return to the carriage. Clarissa was glad that she was allowed to take her little friend with her. The Duke turned out to be a very good person. Georg added that until they returned to Sheridan, Quentin was committed to looking after the little girl. Sheridan, northern city of the Kingdom of Shephos. The subjects enthusiastically greeted their Duke, who returned from the war. The girls cried out about the loneliness they felt in his lordship's absence. All the people were absolutely delighted with the Duke. As expected, Mr. Quentin was absolutely right. Throughout the trip, the servant told the little captive about how gifted their master was. Georg was a multifaceted personality. Officially, the Duke was considered the best knight in Shephos. Also, in addition to outstanding military skills, he wonderfully coped with various intellectual tasks. And of course, he had the noble status of royalty. At one point, he was heir to the throne, but due to the collapse of the Duke's external family, he had to give up rule of the state. George is such an outstanding person that women in the capital line up to win his favor. For years, Letters with passionate declarations of love have been coming to his address. Also, one of his greatest achievements is that he turned the once deserted Sheridan into a livable place. Due to the eternal cold, as well as other shortcomings, people still could not settle here. Since ancient times, bloodthirsty monsters have raged on the territory of these lands. Therefore, it is not surprising that the country was nicknamed the Land of Death. But after the arrival of the Duke, everything changed dramatically. He repaired the entire northern wall to prevent the monsters from approaching. Georg spared no effort in research and material support of the residents. Many people considered him a deity and also the guardian of the North. Quentin could not praise his wonderful leader enough. Clarissa enthusiastically asked the servant what he usually does with the Duke. Even his lordship's assistants must have incredible abilities. Quentin sheepishly admitted that he was just doing various paperwork. Anyone could do this besides the Golem Master. The little girl asked with interest who this person was. It is not surprising that at such a young age, Clarissa was not aware of this personality. Therefore, Quentin began to talk about a mysterious sorcerer who can bring stones to life. Pebbles become faithful servants for those who give them life, obediently carrying out any given command. The colossal golem can fight against powerful creatures and from time to time turn into a structure to protect people. A striking example is the Sheridan mansion, to which the Duke was now heading. But now it was just an ordinary castle. Unfortunately, the bloodline of the Golem Masters was lost forever. The Duke asked Quentin to get out of the carriage and discuss something. As it turned out, Georg was going to check the north wall. This activity could take about half an hour, so the servant could rest for a while. Quentin was indignant, because his master, who spent most of the journey in the saddle, also had to take a breath. However, Georg was not going to neglect the safety of their crew when the magical creatures became more active. The servant awkwardly asked his master what he should do with the prisoner. George offered to leave Clarissa with the Duchess for a while. From now on, the little princess will be forced to use the servants' stairs. The central staircase is reserved for members of the Duke's family and authorized servants only. Suddenly, Quentin noticed how the baby flopped straight onto the floor. The frightened servant immediately rushed to the princess. He was worried that the princess might have been hurt due to the fall. The girl stood up and bowed her head awkwardly. It was a little difficult for her to move because the cape was too long. The servant told Clarissa that first she needed to greet the Duchess. Of course, even a captive should know basic etiquette. The queen tried to teach the girl the rules of behavior because the descendant of a powerful ruler should not lack manners. Clarissa felt her heartbeat begin to increase. The little girl was afraid that if she made a mistake, she would get into trouble again. Suddenly, the girl noticed something very strange on the wall. Quentin explained that this was the same castle they had talked about in the carriage. The structure can turn into a golem. Compared to the royal palace, this castle looked very simple. However, even despite all the primitivism, the stone structures seemed special. The little girl slowly touched the wall and said that the castle looked very kind and beautiful. The maid greeted the arriving guests with a smile on her face. Quentin said they met at a very opportune time. He just wanted to know if the Duchess was in her chambers. The maid menacingly noted that the mistress felt very upset. Duke George did not even say goodbye to his wife before he left. Men are too heartless. The maid asked Quentin for what purpose he came here. The little girl was awkwardly hiding behind the servant's back. The servant said that this child was brought from Grezekai. Now the Duchess will have to be responsible for the little captive. The maid's gaze immediately changed. The woman said that it would be better if the girl was washed before meeting the Duchess. Since the trip was too long, they did not have the opportunity to properly clean themselves up. Quentin asked the maid if he could trust her to wash the baby. The woman said it was part of her job. The girl began to obediently follow Mrs. Bassi. Clarissa felt puzzled, because it seemed to her that the bathrooms were in slightly different places. The room in which the young princess had to wash herself looked very depressing. The maid's stern voice frightened the little girl madly. The maid told Clarissa that from now on, she was obliged to answer all questions asked absolutely honestly. Mrs. Bassi clarified whether Clarissa really came from Grezekai with the Duke. The maid was interested in whether there were women among the Duke's accompanying party. The little girl didn't understand why she was being asked such strange questions. Clarissa began to talk about knights, but the angry maid interrupted her by striking her in the face. The maid wanted to hear something else. Mrs. Bassi decided to clarify her question. These were adult women who may have had particularly close relationships with the Duke. Knights and soldiers did not interest her at all. This is the Duchess's order, so Clarissa couldn't just remain silent and avoid the question. The maid threatened that if the girl did not live up to expectations, her life in this castle would become simply nightmare. The princess did not understand what she should do. The former queen very often tried to blame the girl for actions that she did not commit. In such situations, all that remains is to lie more in order to avoid unnecessary swearing. The maid repeated her question with a smile on her face. Then the little girl said that she could not tell her this information. Of course, the maid was not happy with this answer. The woman assumed that the Duke had silenced the girl. Surely, instead of checking the north wall, he spends this time with his mistress. The little girl said that since the Duke was not around right now, they shouldn't talk about such things. According to Clarissa, the Duke was a very good man. However, the maid was outraged that a prisoner of war hostage dared to contradict anyone in this castle. In this case, the maid had no choice. Mrs. Bassey said she couldn't let a lying girl meet a lady. Before leaving, the maid shouted menacingly at the little girl. Having disobeyed the Duchess's order, Clarissa no longer had the right to meet with her in person. The baby was accused of insubordination and shameless behavior. The beautiful Duchess asked her maid if the captive princess had arrived on the castle grounds. Mrs. Bassey had not the slightest desire to talk about the disobedient girl. The maid convinced the mistress that she should not worry about such frivolous things. The Duchess asked the maid why she was saying such things. Mrs. Bassey insisted that even with her innocent baby face, the baby was still a prisoner of war from a foreign country. Moreover, the Duke also acted completely wrong. He shouldn't have brought a captive into his castle. It would have been much more humane to kill her right there. The young girl was outraged by such cruel words. She was sincerely concerned about the fate of the frightened child. The maid threatened the lady, saying that even though she was being treated like a lady, she was still not a real duchess. Mrs. Bassey called George's wife an ordinary fake. That is why the girl should not forget her real place. If the Duchess has time to worry about a strange child, then it would be better to think about how to please His Serene Highness. When George returns, he must at all costs have an heir. If, before the children arrive, everyone finds out that the marriage was a sham, it will all be over for Darrington. The Duchess must realize this. The girl apologized guiltily for her stupidity. She really should have changed her priorities. The little girl continued to think about what to do. Not long ago, she made a promise to Sir Quentin, but she was never able to say hello to the Duchess. Burdened with other people's cruelty, the little princess fell asleep very quickly. She fell asleep with the thought that she was just a burden, who would certainly be executed after reaching adulthood. The Duchess sneaked in and decided to make sure everything was okay with the baby. The girl could not believe that the maid allowed the child to sleep on such a cold floor. In addition, the room needed to be put in order immediately. The Duchess decided that the time had come to demonstrate her skills. A lot of time passed, but she never forgot about her previous activities. After just a few minutes of cleaning, the room was sparkling clean. The Duchess was very sorry that the little girl had to live in such disgusting, uninhabitable conditions. Georg's wife decided to leave, because if she stayed in this room for a long time, Clarissa would probably wake up. The baby should get a good night's sleep before tomorrow. However, the Duchess reflected for a very long time on the conditions in which the little girl lived. The only pity is that the solution to this problem was not so easy to find. Surely, if she told the Duke about this, he would not even listen to her. You just have to rely on your own strength. Suddenly, the girl felt someone sneak up on her from behind. Georg, who had earlier noticed a suspicious shadow in front of him, began to awkwardly apologize for his rudeness. The girl asked why the Duke was walking around the castle late at night. Georg explained that, having made sure that there were no problems near the north wall, he decided to return home as quickly as possible. After this, Georg decided to ask a counter-question. The girl understood that she would not be able to escape so easily. The Duchess had no idea how to explain what was happening. However, perhaps the current situation has its advantages. The girl told the Duke that she had a small request. This was the only chance to save the baby. Clarissa woke up because Softy decided to wake her up. The pebble wanted to awaken its owner as quickly as possible. The girl was very surprised when she woke up in a clean room. It seemed as if a good fairy had visited here at night. The baby began to ask Softy about what happened. The pebble must have witnessed overnight changes. Then Softy said that at night the Duchess started cleaning. Clarissa couldn't believe it because, judging by Mrs. Bassey's words, George's wife was a disgusting person. Looking around, the girl noticed fresh buns next to her bed. The baby hasn't eaten tasty food for a long time. In the palace, she was usually fed tasteless slop, which even the servants sometimes refused to eat. The girl mentally apologized for considering the Duchess a terrible person. Meanwhile, the maid approached the room. Mrs. Bassey was going to teach the girl a good lesson so that she would not behave like a child. Children's tears always brought joy to the insidious maid. Upon entering the room, the maid immediately began to insult the little princess. Mrs. Bassey was irritated that even under such conditions, Clarissa continued to enjoy her worthless life. The maid assumed that the food and firewood were stolen. After examining the girl from head to toe, the maid asked why she was hiding something behind her back. The girl continued to be accused of deliberate theft. It was difficult for her to justify herself to the intimidating woman. The maid bent down to snatch the hidden item. However, the baby continued to persistently resist. She didn't want to lose Softy. Of course, it was extremely difficult to come up with a way out of such a situation. The maid, using assault, continued to insist that Clarissa was obliged to give her everything she had stolen. Seeing the stones, the maid was very disappointed. She had to waste her time on such nonsense. The maid threw the small bag outside without any hesitation. Gloating, she looked into the eyes of the frightened child with a smile on her face. The maid did not understand why the girl was acting so ridiculously because of a stupid stone. Surely this would not have happened if Clarissa had followed all orders. Mrs. Bassey said it wouldn't end so easily. Surely the Duke will punish the girl after he finds out about her disobedience. However, the maid was very unlucky because it was at that moment that one guest decided to look into the girl's room. The frightened maid could not believe that her master was right behind her. The servant said that the Duke should return only 3 days after checking the northern wall. The Duke waited for the maid to answer his question. The maid had no choice but to start making excuses. It's hard to imagine a more uncomfortable situation. The maid began to make excuses to the master, saying that she had to resort to harsh methods because the girl began to steal things from the castle. The gentleman asked the maid why she was so amused by breaking the laws. The child must grow up healthy until he reaches adulthood. Therefore, no one has the right to beat a girl for educational purposes. The maid was asked if she was going to somehow answer for her consequences. Mrs. Bassey, who simply had no choice, began to argue frantically with her master. If the maid does not urgently come up with some kind of excuse, she will probably be sent to prison. Therefore, the woman said that since the Duchess gave this order, she simply had no choice but to obey. Georg involuntarily remembered how yesterday his wife begged him to take care of the child. The maid not only broke the law, but also framed her mistress. The Duke ordered the traitor to be locked in an underground dungeon. The maid desperately asked for forgiveness for her disgusting act. However, her master was absolutely unshakable. As he left, the Duke told the girl that he would call her to him later. The baby awkwardly lowered her head and began talking about Softy, who was lying alone on the street. At first, Clarissa wanted to ask to be allowed to take her friend. However, after thinking it over, she nevertheless abandoned this idea. The Duke looked very sad, so the little girl was afraid that they would order her to be sent away too. In Clarissa's mind, the current situation seemed absolutely hopeless. The wonderful savior could well have ordered the guards to kill the girl ahead of schedule because he had enough authority. After some time, the servant told the girl that the Duke was calling her. Clarissa prepared herself for the worst outcome. However, instead of terrible executions and bloody torture, a hot bath awaited the little princess. The new maid, who helped the girl wash herself, turned out to be more kind. The woman spoke kindly to the baby and asked if everything suited her. The smiling maid decided to introduce herself to her new charge. Her name was Rosalia. The woman also asked the girl what her name sounded like. The maid immediately said that Clarissa sounded very nice. Moreover, it goes very well with the girl's pink hair. After this phrase, the baby immediately drooped. Previous maids working in the royal palace often discussed her hair color. All this time, Clarissa could only dream of having her locks covered with a radiant blonde. Rosalia drove away bad thoughts from the girl, saying that pink hair is much better than blonde. Surely this elegant and warm color reflects the beauty of Clarissa. It is hardly possible to find a shade that would suit more. Plus, pink hair looks really unique. Noticing that the girl had lowered her head, Rosalia asked if she was okay. Clarissa embarrassedly called the maid the Queen of Compliments. The joyful woman smiled tenderly at the baby. A few minutes later, the bathing procedures came to an end. Clarissa was wearing a new and quite cute dress. The girl was worried because it seemed to her that if she wore too beautiful a robe, the Duke would probably start to get angry. The maid calmed the baby down, saying that the owner would be delighted when he saw this dress. Suddenly, the Duke entered the room. The guy was worried because it seemed to him that the fabric of this dress was too thin for their cold weather. However, the choice was not great, since there were practically no clothes in such small sizes in the palace. The Duke told the girl that she could follow him. He intended to show the little captive something. As it turned out, new quarters were provided for Clarissa. The girl, who could not believe her own eyes, was very surprised, since earlier it seemed to her that her execution would take place today. The baby will live in this room until she comes of age. The Duke asked Clarissa if everything suited her. The girl admitted that before she could only dream of such a room. The Duke also decided to give Clarissa his lost friend. Georg stated that he found this bag right behind the house. The guy was ashamed of his maid's rude behavior. The little girl thanked her wonderful savior from the bottom of her heart. The Duke, who was slightly embarrassed by the situation, decided to change the topic of conversation and discuss Clarissa's chambers. The girl said that this room was too big for her alone. Georg told Clarissa to think about the main quality of this room. First of all, the room is on the second floor, so escaping through the window will not be possible. Also, a good room provides psychological stability, thanks to which the prisoner no longer wants to rebel and break free. Thus, the Duke came to the conclusion that these chambers were an ideal prison for a prisoner. The young princess was amazed at how deep the meaning was in the words of Duke George Maximilian. The owner also asked the maid to bring a thinner blanket. I wouldn't want anything to put pressure on a girl before she reaches adulthood. Clarissa thought she would just look around the room, but in the end there was much more to do. Checking your clothing size, checking your health, taking various nutritional supplements, and much more. It was hectic, but the girl felt incredible happiness. No one had ever behaved so kindly towards Clarissa before. The little girl decided that before she came of age, she would become the coolest. She doesn't want to make those who treated her so warmly blush. The girl kissed her little stone, after which real magic began to happen in the room. Clarissa asked the awakened Mullen if he promised to help her in the future. The girl explained that there are a lot of interesting stones in this castle, so it would be nice if Mullen asked them about Sheridan. The friend asked the hostess why she needed such information. Clarissa just smiled and said that she was starting to like Sheridan more and more every day. The girl continued to watch the street festival with curiosity. Joyful people wandered the bright streets, ate delicious food, and went shopping. Clarissa asked Mullen where he had been all this time. Apparently, the girl very quickly forgot about the favor. However, the pebble remembered that he definitely needed to inspect the mansion. Mullen asked the owner if she didn't feel lonely in the presence of an ordinary small stone. It would be great to attend the festival too. The girl said that this event does not concern them, since it is dedicated to the victory over Krezekai. Surely people will stop having fun if the princess of the defeated kingdom comes to the holiday. However, the girl still felt slightly envious, since before she had not had the opportunity to attend a festival or go to a banquet. Mullen asked Clarissa if she would like to dance with him. The proposal seemed very interesting. However, Mullen was too small a creature for the usual dances. Noticing that her friend was offended, the girl began to sincerely apologize. She would be very happy to keep him company. Clarissa picked up Malin and suggested they start dancing together. The little creature's head began to spin from a large number of sudden movements. Meanwhile, the Duchess was relaxing at her own event. The guests tried their best to cheer up the sad lady. However, the girl tried in every possible way to limit herself from social fun. Rumors often circulated among aristocrats that the Duchess was cold as ice. The girl felt absolutely uncomfortable in the company of pretentious ladies and arrogant gentlemen. The Duchess tried to ignore all the inconveniences until the last moment, but this time there was too much dancing. The excited Duke threw a shawl over his wife's shoulders, since it was too cold that evening. The Duke told the lady that if she did not feel well, she could leave. The girl lied, citing the cause of her main ailment as mild intoxication. It seemed as if this answer puzzled Georg even more. The Duchess decided to ask her husband why he came here. He must have wanted to say something. The guy apologized to the girl for disturbing her with his inappropriate presence. Not wanting to linger, Georg headed towards the exit. However, the young lady stopped her husband. The girl decided to thank the Duke while she had the opportunity. In the end, Georg helped that unfortunate child. Also, wanting to ask for forgiveness, the Duchess bowed deeply. She not only failed to complete the task assigned by her husband, but also made a mistake as her own maid. The Duke promised that the maid would be treated according to the law. The mistress is by no means to blame for the crimes of her subordinates. But Georg wanted to discuss something completely different. The recent report never left his mind. After arresting the maid, the guards searched her bag and found a strange report. Although the Duke's affairs were not recorded, it described in detail his wife's every move. The girl awkwardly asked the Duke if he could make sure that the Count's family did not find out about the incident. The lady did not demand that this information be hidden forever. However, she would like to delay this unpleasant moment for a while. Sooner or later, the Duke will have to tell the whole truth. After all, the maid, broke the law. The Duchess thanked her husband for keeping the incident a secret for some time. Georg Maximilian thought about what happened for a very long time. He refused to accept that the Duchess was disturbing his thoughts. The embarrassed guy did not understand why his heart was filled with such vivid emotions. Suddenly, one of the guards noticed that a door was open in the corridor. The room belonged to a small concubine from Krezekai. The Duke was worried that an intruder could have entered the chambers. It was necessary to protect the baby at all costs. The guards immediately rushed to the captive. Perhaps the girl should have received first aid. But it turned out that the baby had only fallen asleep. Apparently, Clarissa was very tired playing with the stones. Surely the child was very bored after constantly staying in the room. The Duke wondered why the girl had so much time to be sad because of loneliness. Not much has passed since she was brought here. It looked like the little girl needed to increase her stamina. Children are so active after sleep. The Duke suggested that in this case, the child needs regular activity in the fresh air. Meanwhile, the maid finished dressing her little charge. The baby went down to the Duke to go for a winter walk. Clarissa looked incredibly cute in her new outfit. The baby looked somewhat like a snow bunny. Quentin tried his best to overcome his absent-mindedness. The servant told the girl to thank the Duke for buying her new clothes, suitable for winter walks. For such an urgent matter, Georg Maximilian even ordered tailors to be brought from a neighboring village. Clarissa bowed and thanked her savior for giving her warm prison clothes. Starting today, the girl will have the opportunity to engage in outdoor activities. Absolutely all prisoners are required to maintain their mental and physical health by engaging in outdoor activities for a certain period of time. The girl promised to go outside every day to strengthen her weak child body. However, the little girl did not quite understand what she could do outside. The Duke did not have many children, since throughout his youth he was engaged only in fencing. Quentin said that usually when it snows, children are busy building snowmen. For example, you can organize a competition for the largest snow sculpture. The Duke turned to Clarissa and said that she could take part in the competition. It would be nice to create a snowman to symbolize this mansion. The assigned task slightly shocked the girl. The little girl couldn't believe she was told to do something so important. Clarissa promised to work hard for the Duke's honor. Georg said that in that case she could start. The guard accompanied the girl on her way to the garden. When the fragile body went down the stairs, the small legs began to tremble violently. The guard asked the girl not to rush. Clarissa should take care of her body. The guard said that he would have very big problems if the prisoner got hurt. The guy was going to carry the girl in his own arms. The little girl thanked the guard for his concern, but she would like to go down to the garden on her own. The castle grounds turned out to be completely snow-white. The girl was fascinated by the cute footprints that remained where her steps were. The little girl laughed outright with delight. However, now was a time completely unsuitable for winter games. It was worth paying attention to fulfilling the Duke's first order. The only problem was that Clarissa knew absolutely nothing about snowmen. And there is absolutely nothing surprising in this, because the baby arrived from warmer climes. Clarissa wandered around the snowy clearing, puzzled. Before starting work, it was necessary to find out all the details from the guards. The little girl ran up to the stone wall and inquired about her well-being. A mysterious voice stated that he heard from the other guys about the arrival of a new captive. The girl had no idea how this little stranger could know her. The man said that since his henchmen were making noise, the appearance of a new person could not go unnoticed. But the mysterious stranger asked the girl not to be mistaken. He, the guardian of the outer wall, is completely different from those who dwell within. In his opinion, there is no mercy for the prisoners. The stranger threatened the girl not to even think about trying to escape. The man asked Clarissa for what reason she decided to call him. The girl awkwardly lowered her head. She just wanted to know how to properly build an ordinary snowman. Of course, such a reason was not serious enough for a magical summons. The girl suggested that if the stranger was silent, it meant that he also did not know how snowmen were made. The angry spirit asked Clarissa not to compare them with each other. The stranger was annoyed that so much noise was coming from the girl. He had no choice but to help the baby. Suddenly, a bell glowed brightly above the spirit's head. The stranger intended to demonstrate the full might of the Outer Wall Legion. He ordered the mansion guard to ring the bell twice as the captive continued to roam freely. The girl was surprised because the sound turned out to be very strange. However, some of the street guards heard the faint sound of a bell, only they mistook it for an ordinary false alarm. Clarissa worriedly asked the spirit if he was okay. He shouted to the girl to immediately return back to her chambers. The baby, who was very upset by today's walk, asked Softy if she was sleeping. The magical creature appeared right in front of the girl and bowed politely. Clarissa couldn't wait to share today's adventures with someone. Softy asked the girl not to think badly of the guard, because he had faithfully guarded Sheridan for many years, much longer than people. It is no exaggeration to say that the spirits were very proud of this. However, over time, magic tends to fade. Now the guards are not even able to ring a regular bell. And the fact that people consider them useless lies a heavy burden on these brave magical creatures. It wasn't Clarissa's fault. However, Softy did not understand at all why the girl was trying to find out from the spirits how to make a snowman. The baby shared information that not long ago the Duke entrusted her with one very important task. It was necessary to create a snowman and place it right in front of the mansion. Softy said it was a great idea to decorate the castle this way. This means the child is growing up healthy. At first, Clarissa didn't quite understand who exactly she was talking about. Softy said that she is this child, because on the territory of the castle, except for her, there are absolutely no children. Designing a really good snowman is not an easy task, so when Clarissa makes a magnificent sculpture out of snow, the guardian of the outer wall will undoubtedly be very happy too. The little girl asked Softy if she really thought so. The blood in the girl's veins began to fill with extraordinary enthusiasm. Clarissa intended to build the best snowman in the entire settlement. The girl did everything exactly as Softy showed her, but the appearance of the snowman caused her some doubts. It seemed as if this small figure was missing something. Softy said that the mandatory part of a snowman is the handles. Usually, people use 2 small branches as material for this. Remembering this detail, the little captive immediately went in search of the necessary materials. Suddenly, the girl noticed a beautiful stranger running through the forest. The little girl suggested that this girl was a snow fairy. The Duchess awkwardly apologized for her carelessness. She should have been more careful and not stepped on the branches that the little girl was looking for. Clarissa remembered how Softy had recently described the appearance of the mysterious Duchess. Georg's wife had beautiful silver hair and bright blue eyes. The little girl began to ask the stranger if she really was the same Duchess. Meanwhile, the Duke and his servant were busy searching for the young captive. The girl did not at all expect that someone would be busy looking for her. The Duchess politely said goodbye to the baby. She also asked Clarissa to keep their little meeting a secret. The girl, admiring the Duchess's beauty, promised that under no circumstances would she tell anyone about what had happened. The favor of Georg's wife was worth it. The little girl hurriedly went to the Duke. The guy indifferently asked the girl where she had been hiding all this time. Clarissa took too long to respond to the watchman's cries. The girl excitedly said that she was looking for 2 small branches to stick them into the body of the snowman she had built. Clarissa was genuinely embarrassed by the lie she had just made up. The Duke ordered the girl to immediately return to the mansion after completing the snowman. Next, Georg was about to give orders to the guard, but the girl interrupted him. His lordship looked interestedly into the child's eyes. The little girl fearfully asked if she could spend a little more time outside. Today was Mr. Outerwall's day. Clarissa remembered how her stepbrother despised her for talking to stones. The young man argued that such conversations with inanimate objects are utter nonsense, which you definitely shouldn't bother your head with. In his opinion, after something like this, the girl will be called not only stupid, but also crazy. Then the little girl said that she would like to spend a little more time exploring the yard. Immediately after this, the girl undertook to immediately bring the snowman. Finally, the Duke told Clarissa that she must return before sunset. The little girl couldn't wait to show her snowman to Mr. from the outer wall. The girl ran up to the stone wall. The little girl said that she came here to demonstrate something very interesting. Surely the guard will be very interested in this. Since the spirit had not responded for several seconds, the girl suggested that now he might have time to rest. Softy and Mullen sometimes sleep too. The girl decided to awaken the grumpy spirit with her magic kiss. Not even a few seconds had passed before a small guard appeared right in front of her. The spirit was surprised, because there was not even a full moon yet, and such powerful magic was raging around. The little girl was incredibly happy that she managed to summon her new friend. Of course, their first acquaintance did not go well, but Clarissa tried in every possible way to improve their relationship. The guard was very surprised to see a prisoner child right in front of him. He couldn't believe that this little girl managed to wake him up from his sleep. Upon learning that the inner wall had sent a child, the spirit became very angry. The guard turned away irritably and began to complain about his stupid colleague living inside the castle. The girl asked the spirit to stop saying such unpleasant things. After all, the inner walls were always trying to help her. The guard said that in that case, they had nothing to talk about among themselves. Besides, you can't pour magic into strangers unless you plan to spend your entire life with them. The little captive apologized guiltily to the spirit and then said that she should leave now. Today, many things were filled with magical power. The guard was very surprised to see little Softy flying up to him. Apparently, she had insomnia today. Before going to bed, the little girl decided to look at her old friend. She also asked the guard if he now possessed a piece of magical power from Clarissa. The guard said that because of this magic, he was completely unable to sleep that night. Softy asked her friend to treat Clarissa with more warmth. This girl needs someone to take care of her. Softy noticed that when a guard starts to like certain people, his behavior changes very much. The confused spirit began to make excuses. The guardian stated that he absolutely cannot stomach ordinary people. Due to their weak bodies, they die too quickly. Softy suggested that it was for this reason that her friend did not like children. According to the spirit of the inner walls, Clarissa was a wonderful child. Surely other magical creatures noticed how pure the soul of this innocent girl was. The guard said with disappointment that very soon they would turn into ordinary stones. This is even better than waiting for a master who will never return to them. Softy asked her friend not to be dramatic about this. The spirit said that she really wants to continue living. They existed for many years, protecting this mansion. Suddenly, magical creatures noticed a suspicious man who was quietly moving around the castle. Softy suggested that this uninvited guest could be very dangerous. Now is not the time to stand on the sidelines. It is necessary for the guard to ring the bell and notify all the guards about the penetration into the territory of the mansion. The spirit asked Softy what she was talking about. The guard is not required to ring the bell. The knights have enough experience and skills to independently cope with an intruded stranger. Softy couldn't believe her own ears. The fairy demanded that the guard come to his senses, because he was also a knight protecting this huge castle. The guard asked Softy to shut up. From now on, his bell was completely useless in comparison with other security methods. He will only become a common laughingstock if he calls it. The spirit no longer wanted to be an idiot to people. Softy tried to reassure her comrade, saying that perhaps this time everything would turn out completely differently. Clarissa kindly shared her magic with him. The guard asked Softy if her words were serious. The spirit had absolutely no desire to use the magic generated by the little girl. However, the guard still came to the conclusion that he should take advantage of his last chance. The guardian of the outside ordered the bell to ring twice in order to drive away all uninvited guests. Suddenly, the bell began to emit a powerful stream of magic. The spirits were delighted with the sight they saw. Before, the guard did not believe that he would ever be lucky enough to see the emission of this beautiful light again. Quentin, as well as other inhabitants of the castle, heard a bell ringing outside. People have heard the false ringing before. When the bell rings once, it means that trouble is inside the mansion. 3 times means that there is trouble in a city or village, and twice, in a palace or a mansion. It rings when an intruder tries to break in, or when a prisoner tries to escape from the castle. The Duke rose abruptly from his seat. He wanted to personally check everything and make sure there was no danger. The servant convinced his master that nothing serious had happened. Therefore, his lordship does not have to leave his workplace. However, the Duke remained unshaken in this situation. The Duke said that there was no need to send knights. He will be able to deal with the problem on his own. Now the patrol was supposed to guard the front gate. If someone breaks in or tries to escape, they will somehow end up in the back garden. Now the Duke could examine the uninvited guest in more detail. However, his situation seemed very strange. Apparently, the stranger accidentally caught his clothes on the gate. Georg approached the mysterious guest and asked who he was. Perhaps the stranger was not up to something evil, but now that he has been discovered, it is foolish to deny his entry into the territory of the mansion. The Duchess did not at all expect to see her husband in such a place. The girl tried to explain to Georg, but her cape suddenly got tangled. The frightened young lady jumped straight into the arms of the Duke. It was lucky that he was able to catch her without any effort. The embarrassed girl began to awkwardly apologize to her master. The Duke asked his wife to calm down, because if she twitched, she would probably get hurt. Once inside the castle, the girl once again awkwardly apologized for her frankly inappropriate behavior, which was not typical of young ladies. Fortunately, the Duke accepted someone else's apology without any whim. Moreover, Georg, concerned about the girl's health, was going to examine her sprained leg. As expected, almost the entire ankle was painfully swollen. The Duke decided to leave the premises for a while in order to find all the necessary medicines. Suddenly, the girl noticed a door that connected her chambers with the Duke's room. The lady completely forgot about it, since after the end of the wedding she had no opportunity to use it at all, although it would be very strange if the Duchess really needed it. After entering into this forced marriage, they lived for the last 3 years as if they were complete strangers. The girl tried to figure out what excuses she could use to best explain what was happening to the Duke. Obviously, Georg suspected something was clearly wrong. The lady hoped to get out this time too. Over the past few years, Mrs. Bassey continued to continuously spy on her and report everything to her masters. Mr. Darrington was interested in this information. However, if the letters suddenly stop coming, then this will seem like something suspicious. That is why the Duchess tried to forge letters, but she was quickly caught. If the girl continues to remain silent, then her behavior may be considered too strange. The girl kindly thanked her husband for bringing her all the necessary medicine. The Duchess wanted to take care of the leg injury herself, but George insisted and asked his wife to lend him her leg. Now it was too difficult for the girl to move due to her injury. However, the Duke promised that he would do everything necessary as quickly as possible in order to improve her condition. The guy just asked the girl to stop constantly asking him for forgiveness for the slightest offenses. The Duchess understood perfectly well that she had to explain today's incident. The girl, trembling with fear, began to explain the need to go to the village in order to send a letter to her friend back home. But since the Duchess completely forgot about what she had promised, she had to leave today in the middle of the night. The Duke was puzzled by the mysterious friendship that required the girl to sneak to the postman at night. This excuse sounded as if his wife had a lover. And although the reality was completely different, the Duchess could not yet come up with a better excuse in her head. The girl could only hope that Georg would no longer have any unnecessary questions. It would have been much more favorable for the Duke if his wife had turned to him personally for help. After all, sending a letter would definitely not be difficult for him. The young man with sadness on his face asked the girl to stop hiding. From the very beginning, he knew absolutely everything about what was happening. The concerned Duchess tried to understand what information her husband had. Perhaps he knew all those persecutions, or even the girl's entire biography did not seem such a mystery to him. The fact is that in fact the Duke's wife was just an ordinary maid. The aristocrat did not want to send his beloved daughter to the north, so he was able to find a very good replacement for her, who would continue to remain silent about what happened. In return, the girl was promised treatment for her mother. Therefore, the fictitious wife should have held out until the mother received all the necessary treatment. The Duke once again repeated that he knew everything. However, for some reason, Georg suspected a completely different secret. It seemed to the guy that his wife had another loved one. No girl would want someone to force her into marriage. Even Georg could understand how difficult it is to live with an unloved person. Now the Duchess realized that in fact, there had just been a terrible misunderstanding. Georg expressed his desire to annul their marriage because he did not want to force the girl to live with him. The Duke admitted that such thoughts had been tormenting his persistent mind for a very long time. Right now, this is impossible to do due to the surveillance of the king and queen, but in a few years, the girl will finally be able to become free. Having finished expressing his thoughts, the guy bowed and headed towards the doors. The shocked girl could not believe that now she would have to face such a problem. However, this outcome was for the better. If this marriage is successfully dissolved, then Mr. Darrington will not be able to show any indignation about this. This is exactly what the Duchess wanted. But even so, the girl continued to experience deep sadness and a sense of loss. Mrs. Bassey still did not understand why there was absolutely no news from the girl. Her mother was still held hostage. Therefore, the fake Duchess had no choice but to get her maid out of the dungeon. Then the maid remembered that the girl was learning writing skills. This means that she could well have sent letters on someone else's behalf. Mrs. Bassey was very frightened, because in this case she would have to sit in prison until the end of time. Such a fate did not suit her at all. Suddenly, Lord Benson appeared among the cameras. His appearance turned out to be very opportune. The woman leaned against the bars and began desperately begging her friend for help. The lying maid said she had something to tell her. This information was extremely important. However, the Lord only apologized and moved on to attend to more urgent matters. If Mrs. Bassey wanted to say something, it could be done through the ordinary warden. The woman shouted loudly that the Duchess was actually deceiving the Duke. Lord Benson slowly turned to the imprisoned maid. A new day has begun at the castle. Rosaria brought lunch for her little subordinate. The little girl began to remove the drawings from the table to make room for food. The maid asked what exactly Lady Clarissa was doing. Then the girl decided to show off her charming drawing. The maid was touched by the baby's efforts. Clarissa admitted that the painted men are her lunch friends. Hearing this, the maid was very surprised. The girl placed the drawing in front of her and thanked her imaginary friends for the honor of being present during her meal. Clarissa also did not forget to show gratitude to her beloved maid. However, Rosaria was still worried about the mental well-being of the lonely girl for a very long time. Then the maid and the Duke decided to share their concerns about the baby's well-being. The fact is that children should dine with adults in order to learn correct posture and manner of speech. Clarissa needs adults who can be very good role models for her. The Duke said that if a girl needed ethics lessons, he could hire a tutor especially for her. His lordship did not consider solitary eating to be problematic. However, the maid decided to show Clarissa's morning drawing in order to best explain her idea about eating together. Today, the young captive sat down at the table with this drawing and said that these little men were her dinner friends. If this continues, it is possible that the child will develop mental problems. In order for her to grow up to be a healthy child until the age of 18, it is necessary to monitor such things. Quentin stated that if the Duke had too much to do, he could keep Clarissa company. Besides, they already knew each other quite well. The maid said it was a great idea. However, before going to lunch, Quentin would like to find a lady who can accompany him. Rosalia recalled that the drawing depicts a couple of young people. That is why it is advisable for Quentin to come with a woman. The maid asked the servant if he really didn't have a single girlfriend. An oppressive silence began to fill the office. Quentin didn't know how he should justify himself in this situation. The guy sadly admitted that since childhood he had been absorbed in his studies. And after he began working for the Duke, he had absolutely no free time to build relationships with anyone. It was evening the next day. Georg did not find a better solution than to dine with his wife and Clarissa. The Duke introduced his wife, the Duchess of Sheridan, to the little girl. Clarissa was incredibly happy to have the opportunity to spend some time with this beautiful girl. The little girl could not believe that she was seated at the same table with such honorable people. However, oddly enough, the atmosphere here was terrifying. The girl didn't understand whether eating should really be so quiet. Because of her inner agitation, she even had difficulty tasting the food. Watching what was happening, Lord Benson remembered how, just recently, Mrs. Bassey called the current Duchess a fake. It was very difficult for the young man to believe these accusations, but the maid was not going to shut up. Perhaps the maid turned out to be a liar, but the lie she told sounded so confident that one could involuntarily believe it. According to Missy Bassey, she came to this castle solely for the purpose of observation. Out of guilt towards the Duke, she tried to find the right moment to tell him absolutely the whole truth. However, the Duchess caught her and ordered her to be imprisoned. The maid begged to believe her because the current situation was completely unfair to her. Lord Benson had already begun to doubt who had the truth behind him. However, the maid stated that the Duke also noticed something suspicious. More recently, he began to avoid his wife. The maid asked the Lord to watch them more closely, because he would definitely be able to feel something strange. The young man tried to understand why he had not been able to notice anything suspicious before. However, apparently, the relationship between them has always been so cold. It seemed strange that after several years of living together, the young people did not even look at each other. And little Clarissa was also very uncomfortable because of this atmosphere.